Good morning, CPAC. Good morning. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much, Matt Schlapp and CPAC, for inviting me to speak. If socialism were a movie, socialism would be Friday the 13th, because it seems to always stalk college co-eds who all think that the death and violence is just a scary story that never happened, and they are so convinced that it will never happen to them that they mock the old person the one person in town who saw it firsthand. They call him crazy, a nut who still believes in ghost stories. And then they're all dead. And then Jason, his body disappears. And only the old guy who saw it coming saw that the body is gone. And we have sequel after sequel. It happens time and again in movie theater after movie theater and country after country. Make no mistake, stop trying to hook up in some cabin in the woods and prepare, because Jason is coming. He's right behind you, and this time he's coming with a hammer and a sickle. A lot of people think that democratic socialism is just a new coat of paint on the old FDR democratic policies. But let me give you a quote from a Vox column. The title, Democratic Socialism Explained by a Democratic Socialist. The author writes, quote, "There's truth in the long run. Democratic socialists want to end capitalism." Ma'am, we've traced the call. It's coming from inside the House and the Senate. From the column, quote, "Many observers see groups like DSA pushing for policies like Medicare for all and decide that we must actually be something like New Deal liberals who are simply confused about the meaning of socialism. But that's not true. Medicare for all is an instructive example. Medicare for all is not socialism. That would just only nationalize the insurance, not the whole healthcare system. But democratic socialists," still quoting, "ultimately want something more like the British National Health Service. So why aren't they going for that?" Well, we could ask ourselves, why weren't they going for Medicare for all when we were talking about Obamacare? Again, quoting, "Because we currently don't have the support to push for and win such an ambitious program. Social democratic reforms like Medicare for all, in the eyes of DSA, part of the long, uneven process of building that support and eventually overthrowing capitalism." End quote. This is the philosophy of the candidates the Democrats are now saying are the future of the party and the future of America. Today, we must dismiss two fallacies. The first one is that capitalism doesn't work. The second is that socialism doesn't work. Let me be the first to tell you that socialism does indeed work. In fact, it works perfectly as designed every single time. We have been having this debate for 170 years now. We look at socialism and say, look, it doesn't work. Look at all the poor and the starving people. Look at all of the piles of dead bodies. And they say, capitalism doesn't work. Look at all the fat rich people. Look at all of the inequality. Well, yes, we have to look at the goals of both. The goal of socialism is equality for all, the equality of outcome. So the goal of socialism is that, then the goal of capitalism being the opposite must be the opposite, inequality of outcome. Yes, the precise and natural result of the free market. Capitalism is the inequality of outcomes. Or to put it another way, capitalism acknowledges and encourages merit. You cannot have merit without inequality. If you want to get rid of inequality, you must first get rid of merit. But capitalism safeguards the promise and hope of inequality. This is why we all studied in school. Why we worked so hard to get an A. Because we knew if we had an A, even if others had a D or an F, what it meant for us was the promise of bettering our own lives and our own prospects. It's why we worked hard. It's why many of us get up every morning. Why we strive to create or invent, not just to better our world, but to better ourselves and our station. That is the promise and the hope of inequality. With socialism, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how inventive you are. Everyone and everything is equally miserable. In a free market society, there can never be equality, and that's okay. By okay, what I mean is it's the greatest system ever to be devised by man, to lift entire continents out of equal misery and poverty. Capitalism has made the world, yes, more unequal, but we've done it by lifting billions of people out of poverty. And yet, there still remains a pocket of people who are miserable because the free market hasn't gotten there yet, but it will. But while there are people in misery, the rate of children dying because of capitalism, children dying before the age of 5 has dropped by over half. Yet, 70% of the people believe that healthcare and poverty has gotten worse. Why is that? Well, for one, cable news will obsess over a plane crash for months, but just the life-saving improvement of life before the age of 5 that has been made since 1990 is the equivalent of averting 27 major plane crashes full of children every single day. After a shooting, we all hear how the media will say guns are the problem, but the lives saved due to just a few improvements made in medicine in the last decade alone is the equivalent of erasing every gun murderer, every gun-related death for over 630 years. And yet, you never hear about it. All we hear about is how capitalism is causing inequality. You hear it's fewer people suffering and dying than ever before, not on television. There are still more to save. But while socialism is making everyone except the elites in Venezuela equally starving and desperate, the free market is busy quietly bringing clean water and electricity to the remotest and poorest parts of the world. We've been having the wrong debate. We've let them control and frame this discussion and cast shame on capitalism by pointing at inequality. They're judging a system that has flaws but works by comparing it to a system that has never worked and never existed. It is all because at some point the left has come to believe the great myth about us and our species. To them, mankind is a virus. To them, masculinity is toxic and femininity is weakness. To them, the world is perfect if we could just get rid of man. And it all comes from the inescapable reality of our free market. The one thing that is absolute proof of our depravity, the inequality of outcomes. But the promise of fluid inequality is why people came to America in the first place. We didn't come here to escape from the rich. We came here to escape the system that doomed us to poverty and our children to poverty. It is the recognition that inequality is a fact of nature, but through merit and equal justice, you can change your status and create a better future for your children. They say they seek equality because it would be more fair, but here is the truth. The trick of the language that has been used now for 2 centuries. Socialism is about equality, but it is not about fairness. Capitalism is not about equality, But fairness and justice are its objectives. When it comes to economics, equality and fairness are not synonyms. The stated goal of socialism is to achieve equality for all. The true goal of capitalism is to achieve liberty and justice for all. And that is why the left doesn't like our Pledge of Allegiance, that and God. It is an observable truth that equality does not exist in nature. It doesn't exist in beehives, in roses, or tails of peacocks. And equality does not exist in man. If you don't believe me, go ahead. Challenge LeBron James to a game of one-on-one. Challenge Kasparov to a game of chess. Challenge Ben Shapiro to debate anything. Equality is not our natural state. One incredible, awesome thing about each of us is that we're all unique individuals endowed by a creator with our own set of superpowers, skills, and talents. We all have our own weaknesses and challenges, and thank God, or this would be a very boring world. You were blessed to be born in America, where we all have the opportunity to first lift ourselves out of misery and poverty and then voluntarily help the rest of the world. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with your desire to achieve, your desire to work hard, to compete, and yes, to win. There is nothing wrong with your expectation to be rewarded for your work and then to enjoy those rewards as you see fit, which of course may include helping the less fortunate. You are the only one that has the power to write your own story. Your destiny is your journey to make. Here is the truth that made America great. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and in plain English, property. No matter what government edicts are passed by any government, that cannot be taken away from you. It cannot be taken away by fascist, authoritarians, socialist, and yes, even democratic socialist. For slavery by majority vote is still slavery. You are the only one that can take away your rights through poor choices. And even then, you have the right of redemption, to begin again, to pull yourself out of the mud and reach again for the heavens. Capitalism, yes, it does have its flaws, especially now that it has lost its moorings. The free market and justice must always be blindfolded. Being black or poor, white, rich, left, right, it should neither save you nor condemn you. Judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin or the color of my hat. We're Americans. We are Americans, and we will change the world for the better once again. When we look to a bright future and recognize that it is precisely the system of inequality of outcomes coupled with individual compassion and empathy that made America great. And it is still the conservative movement's embrace of our human nature and an economic system that incentivizes achievement that makes us great. Ours is a system that respects human liberty and ingenuity. Ours is the system that generates prosperity for mankind. Socialism aims to make mankind what we are not and can never be. It works to achieve a state of being that doesn't exist in the natural world, and it does it the only way it can, the only way it ever does, by making us all equally enslaved, equally poor, and all equally dead. We are Americans, but with all humility and without any more hesitation, we must stand up and declare that we are conservatives in the tradition of Washington and Lincoln and Reagan. And we must stand for the Bill of Rights, which grants each of us liberty. We must stand for the rich and for the poor. We will stand for those who have always been here and those ancestors that came on the Mayflower. And we will stand for those who are coming here legally today. Their hopes are our hopes. Their success is our success. And it will come because we stand for blind and equal justice. And we stand for the glorious promise of the natural inequality of outcomes for mankind. God bless.